Take off that medal before speaking to this court. The judge's voice cut through the courtroom. Sharp, cold, and absolute. The man on the witness stand didn't flinch. His hands trembled slightly, resting on the edges of a worn blazer. Pinned to his chest, above his heart, gleamed a silver star. Some people looked away. Others stared, confused or smirking. But he said nothing. He simply looked at the judge, not with defiance, but with something deeper, something older, and heavier. Then, from the very back of the courtroom, someone stood. A man in full military dress uniform, chest full of ribbons, eyes like steel. He raised his hand. Permission to speak, Your Honor. That moment would end the judge's career and remind an entire courtroom what honor really looks like. The courthouse was unusually full that morning. Not because of the case, it was just a civil land dispute, but because of him. Word had spread, quietly, not through papers or broadcasts but whispers. A man was coming to testify. The man. He arrived alone. No lawyer, no family, just quiet footsteps, a worn pair of shoes, and that blazer. The fabric faded, but the metal beneath it unmistakable. A silver star. America's second highest award for valor in combat. Most people in the room had never seen one in person. Some didn't even recognize it. But Judge Harold Whitmore did. He entered stiff and cold, known for his dislike of anything that threatened his strict courtroom order. Military service?
None.
Ambition? Endless. He sat down, and his eyes locked onto the medal. He said nothing at first, waiting for his moment. When the bailiff finally called, "Mr. Joseph Emery, please take the stand." The room fell so quiet you could hear breath. Joseph stood with the steady caution of someone who had learned, long ago, never to rush anything. He walked slowly to the stand. No glance to the crowd. No acknowledgement of the whispers. He sat. Then it came. "Before you begin," the judge said, leaning forward, "remove that medal. This is a courtroom, not a parade." A pause. Tension crept into the room like cold air through a crack in the wall. A cough.
A gasp.
A nervous shift in the jury box. Joseph didn't move. He just looked at the judge. There was no anger, no pride, just the silence of someone who's seen too much to be surprised. "I said remove the medal, Mr. Emery," the judge repeated, "or you will not speak." Joseph's hand moved slowly. He reached for the back of the silver star, unpinned it, and laid it gently on the wooden ledge beside the microphone, like someone folding a flag in private. He sat back, his hands in his lap, his gaze steady and distant, somewhere between the courtroom and the battlefield in his memory. The medal sat there, lifeless, out of place, a sacred thing cast aside by the authority of a man who had never earned one. The judge, satisfied, turned to the attorney. "You may proceed." The lawyer hesitated, then nodded, approaching the stand. "Mr. Emery, please state your name and occupation for the record." Joseph's voice was low, rough, gravel-worn by time. "Joseph Francis Emery, retired, former aircraft mechanic, United States Army, 1st Cavalry Division." He said it plainly, like reciting facts that could not be debated. And so it began.
Questions about land.
Property lines. Irrigation channels. But no one was really listening.
Not to that.
Everyone's attention stayed fixed on the silver star sitting beside him, stripped from his chest, not by shame, but by decree. Even as Joseph answered, calmly, clearly, each word carried more weight than anything else in the room. At one point, the opposing counsel objected to a question.
Routine.
Unnecessary. The judge leaned forward. "Let's not waste time here. This isn't a war memorial, it's a courtroom. We deal in facts, not sentiment." That landed like a slap across the room. Heads lifted. Eyes widened. A current of discomfort swept across the gallery. "I don't care how many medals someone's collected," the judge added, glancing toward the silver star. "You want respect. Follow the rules." Cruel. Cold. Deliberate. Joseph finally turned. Looked directly at the judge. Not with rage. Just with silence. a silence more powerful than words. Mr. Emery, the attorney asked, trying to steady the moment, in your own words, what happened that morning? Joseph blinked once, then nodded. I arrived at the property line around 6:30. Gate was unlocked, like always. I was meeting my neighbor, Mr. Collins, to check the irrigation channel. And what did you see? Two men in suits. Not Collins. They were measuring the boundary line with a laser. What did they say to you? One of them told me I didn't have permission to be there anymore. And did you? I've had a key to that gate since 1989. Collins gave it to me himself. Told me I could cross the land whenever I needed. Why would he do that? Joseph paused. His voice softened, not in weakness, but reverence. Because his brother was my crew chief. And he never came home. The room froze. That sentence cracked the atmosphere like thunder. Someone shifted in their seat. A woman clutched her purse. Even the opposing counsel said nothing. Because there are truths that don't need explanation. Only recognition. And in that moment, the silver star meant more than the entire courtroom. Take off that medal before speaking to this court. The words echoed across the courtroom, sharp, clipped, final. The man on the witness stand didn't move. He stood there in a worn blazer, hands lightly trembling, a silver star gleaming quietly on his chest. Not loud, not polished, just present, like a wound that never fully healed. People shifted in their seats. Some avoided eye contact. A few smirked, but he didn't speak. He only looked at the judge, not with defiance, but with the weight of decades behind his silence. Then, from the far back row, a man rose to his feet. He wore a deep green U.S. Army dress uniform, polished shoes, rows of medals, eyes like steel. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Your Honor, may I speak? That was the moment everything shifted. What followed would end a judge's career and remind the entire nation what honor really means. That morning, the courthouse was packed. Not because of the case, a simple property easement dispute, but because of who was expected to testify. Word had spread quietly from neighbor to neighbor. A name, Joseph Emery. A man whispered about, rarely seen. A man who never spoke about what he had done. He walked in alone. No lawyer. No family. Just steady steps. A faded blue blazer. And the silver star. Most people had never seen one in person. But Judge Harold Whitmore wasn't impressed. Known for his cold demeanor and rigid courtroom, Whitmore had no tolerance for anything he couldn't control and a visible distaste for pageantry. He watched Emery with tight lips and a narrowed gaze. And when Emery was finally called to testify, the moment he stood, the judge leaned forward and said it. Before you begin, remove that medal. This is a courtroom, not a parade. There was a stillness so sharp it could cut steel. Emery didn't react. He didn't blink. Remove it, Mr. Emery, the judge repeated, or you will not be permitted to speak. With a slow breath, Joseph reached up and unpinned it. No drama. No glare. He laid the medal down next to the microphone. Quiet, almost reverent. The Silver Star, second highest military honor for valor in combat, now rested like an afterthought on the edge of the wood. Out of place. Out of respect. But Joseph said nothing. He sat, hands folded, voice low, graveled with age. Joseph Francis Emery, retired, former aircraft mechanic, 1st Cavalry Division, U.S. Army. The questions began. Landlines, boundary disputes, survey maps. But no one cared. Not anymore. They watched him and the way he answered.
Calm. Clear.
Each word soaked in memory and restraint. When asked why he had been allowed access to the disputed land, he said only this. Because the man who gave me the key, his brother, was my crew chief. And he never came home. The courtroom stopped breathing. The opposing lawyer, a polished, younger man, approached, too confident for his own good. Would you agree, Mr. Emery, that memories fade with time? Joseph looked up. I remember who died under me. I don't forget those names. And that was the end of it. He stood to leave, pausing briefly as he passed the silver star lying beside the stand. But he didn't pick it up. He walked away, leaving it behind. That's when it happened. From the back of the courtroom, a man in full military dress stood. No one had noticed him until now. He had been still, silent, waiting.
He spoke.
"Your Honor, may I speak?" The voice carried, not loud, but with authority. Every head turned. Even the judge froze. The uniform was pristine. The medals undeniable. Medal of Honor. The judge fumbled. "This is a court of law. Unless you've been subpoenaed or our counsel." "I am neither," the man replied. "But I've served 3 tours in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan, and I have the right to speak when a decorated veteran is humiliated in public." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of presence. Slowly, from the back rows, others began to stand. One removed his cap. Another crossed his arms. Veterans.
Silent.
Standing, not in protest, but in recognition. Judge Whitmore tried to recover. "This is highly irregular." The man stepped forward. "I knew Joseph Emery. Before he wore that medal, he wore blood. Not his own. The blood of the man he carried out of a burning chopper in Cambodia. I was one of them." The room fell into absolute silence. "He's not here to brag. He never is. But what you did today, Your Honor, wasn't about decorum. It was about power, about your discomfort with something you never earned." The judge opened his mouth, but no words came. The man walked forward, step by step. He picked up the silver star with both hands. "This," he said, holding it up, "is not jewelry. It is not a decoration. It is a grave marker that happens to shine." He turned to Joseph. "You didn't remove it. You surrendered it. And that's what hurts the most." Joseph stood again. The 2 men embraced, brief, silent, real. Joseph took the medal, but didn't pin it back on. He held it in his hand, like something that needed protecting. The man turned to the judge one last time. "You've embarrassed a war hero in front of his community. The consequences of that choice are not mine to deliver. They're already on their way." Then he walked out. One by one, people in the courtroom stood. No clapping. No chanting. Just rising, quietly. A human verdict the court could no longer control. Judge Whitmore sat frozen. For the first time in 20 years. He looked small. Court was dismissed early that day, officially, for procedural review. But everyone knew the truth. Joseph Emery didn't return to that courtroom. He didn't need to. By nightfall, the story had gone national. Veteran networks lit up. Clips recorded from phones went viral. A decorated officer standing. A courtroom silenced. A judge crumbling under the weight of his own ignorance. By week's end, 200 active and retired military officers signed a formal complaint. Sponsors pulled from the judge's re-election campaign. A sitting senator called his actions a disgrace to the robe. Judge Harold Whitmore never returned to the bench. Early retirement. No interview. No apology. His legacy reduced to a single clip. A man in robes ordering silence, and being silenced by something greater than himself. Joseph Emery didn't speak to the press. "There's nothing to explain," he told a local reporter. He went home. Same house. Same pickup. Same chair by the window. The silver star was never worn again. But it sat, under glass, in a wooden case. Not to display glory, but to remember those who never came home. And somewhere, far from the courthouse that failed him, people still whispered his name. Because sometimes justice doesn't need a verdict. Sometimes it just stands up, says 5 quiet words, and changes everything.